Hi guys and welcome back. What you just saw was obviously clay cracking, which was a trend that popped up several years ago. It's basically air-dry clay covered with several layers of nail polish that produces a satisfying crack when you press on it. Over the years, I've also made various videos testing out different top coats to see what works best for cracking. In the most recent experiment, I discovered that resin has an almost identical effect. However, I never really considered changing the material that's underneath the nail polish. One viewer left a comment under a very old video asking what would happen if you cover a squishy with clear nail polish and try to crack that. I thought it was a great idea, so that's exactly what we're going to try out today. As a forewarning, this DIY wasn't as straightforward as I expected. Feel free to skip to the end if you just want to see the cracking part, or stick around and learn some interesting stuff on different types of silicones and molding putty. The main challenge here is to create a replica of the clay heart shape that I use in my other clay cracking videos. Obviously, making a heart with paper clay is really simple and it just takes a few seconds. But for the sake of comparison, I want to have a squishy in exactly the same shape, which means the first step is to create a model using polymer clay. I'm making a ball and flattening it slightly. Then I'm cutting out a triangle shape with scissors and smoothing down the corners. I also like to use a toothpick to add more definition, and this is pretty much the quickest and easiest way to create a heart. Now I'm going to bake this for 30 minutes to harden. This is the mold putty that I normally use, which is very expensive and made by a French company. I always thought there wasn't a big difference between silicone putties, but a few recent videos made it clear that there is. The brand name putty cures faster and has a slightly oily surface, which makes demolding much easier. Because the hard squishy I'm making now is just an experiment, I really don't want to use my most expensive craft supplies on it. So this is a good chance to try out these two cheap silicone putties that I got from Temu. To be fair, these definitely work fine, but there are just some tiny differences that you can notice. The purple putty takes longer to cure, so you have to keep your hands pressed around the piece for several minutes. The texture is also very dry, which makes it more difficult to demold. This pink putty is completely new to me, and the most interesting thing is the texture. It's much lighter and fluffier than the others, almost like comparing paper clay to cold porcelain clay. It's also softer and more flexible after curing. You can see how I can press it down and it just bounces back up, almost like foam rubber. To make the squishy itself, I'm going to use two different techniques. I want it to be as soft as possible so the cracking process can work best. The first method is to use Shore 00 silicone mixed with Deadener, which is what I did in this video to soften up Elmer squishies. I found that 40% Deadener is about the maximum amount you can add before the squishy becomes too soft to cure. I'm also mixing in some glitter to give it a nice look. The second method is Sophie & Toffee's new squishy gel. This one came out very recently and I simply want to test it out. I prefer the crystal clear appearance of the older squishy gel, but this one apparently has a new non-sticky formula that cures more easily. If you've watched my Taba squishy video, then you remember that these Temu silicone putties are really hard to demold, so I'm definitely going to use a mold release spray on all of them. The shape of the hearts didn't make it any easier because I couldn't really find a grip. And despite using mold release, parts of the pink mold actually got stuck into the squishy, giving it an interesting speckled pattern. It's obvious that this type of molding putty isn't ideal for use with silicone-based squishy gel. And now it's finally time to cover it with nail polish. I was initially a bit worried that the polish might not stick to silicone, but I'm glad to see that this isn't a problem. Here you can see what it looks like after one coat, and this is definitely still too thin. I can press the surface down easily, and this isn't going to make any noise if you try to crack it. Clay cracking requires at least 3 or 4 coats of polish covering the entire piece, so I'm also going to turn this around and do the base. The pink squishy made with Deadener looked quite promising at first. This is exactly what a Taba squishy should look like in the mold. But after trying to demold it further, I realized that the inside hasn't cured at all and it just isn't holding its shape. This could have happened because I used too much Deadener or too much glitter. So I had to throw this one out and just start again. This time I used slightly less of both, and the second one cured without any problems. This is softer than the blue heart and has a perfect mochi squishy texture. I was trying to aim for a tappet squishy texture, but I think that's just too difficult with the limited materials that I have at the moment. Now I'm just going to apply the nail polish and leave everything to dry. Here are the finished hearts, and it's time to see if they crack. The perfect texture for clay cracking is when the top coat layer feels shiny and tight. You should be able to tap the surface with your nails and feel a kind of tension across the top. This means that it's more likely to break apart with an audible noise. The back of each squishy should also be covered with polish, so there's more pressure building up when you press it. I noticed the edges of the blue one is starting to lift off, so I'm going to crack it before it gets any looser. To my surprise, this was more satisfying than I expected. It reminds me of the wax top coat experiment from this video, but with better ASMR. The major advantage of cracking a squishy is that it's completely reusable. One of the complaints about clay is that you can only crack it once and the material has effectively been wasted. So this method is more sustainable and definitely cheaper in the long run as well. And of course, you don't have to make your own squishy like I did. You can simply apply nail polish to any mochi squishies that you already have. Once you've cracked it all, the nail polish layer simply peels off and can be discarded. The squishies are not damaged at all. If you're interested in more sustainable types of ASMR crafting, then be sure to check out my reusable nanobubble video here. I'm Joanna, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!